Okay, Chair, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ben. There we go. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's YouTube page. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely. A decision summary, minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask the members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. If you wish to speak, then please raise the virtual hand, which is blue and is located at the bottom of the participants section. And some people may have it. Excuse me. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. If you wish to speak, then please raise the virtual hand, which is blue and is located at the bottom of the participants section. Some people may have a newer version of Zoom, in which case the raised hand function has moved from the participants section to the reactions section and is now yellow. Whatever version you are using, please ensure you use the raised hand function to indicate you wish to speak. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting will be abandoned until such time as it can be recorded. I will begin by asking Dan Callow, Democratic Services Officer, to do a roll call of the committee if members can confirm their attendance.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Coles?
I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Joseph?
Present, thank you, Dan.
Councillor Shahid?
Present, Dan. Cheers.
Councillor Warren?
Good evening, I'm present.
Thank you. And yourself, Chair, Councillor Over?
Yes, present.
Thank you. And just to confirm that we also have Pete Carpenter, Director of Corporate Resources, Fiona McMillan, Monitoring Officer, Ben Stevenson, Data Protection Officer, and Steve Crabtree, Chief Internal Auditor, with us this evening.
Yeah, lovely. Item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Fowler.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? If so, please can they raise their virtual hand now?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January and the 24th of February. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Members are asked to agree 2 sets of minutes for the meeting held on the 25th of January and the 24th of February 2021. Please can I ask for a proposer and seconder?
Have Councillor Coles.
Lovely.
Thank you, Chair. All post reports.
Thank you.
And got Councillor Joseph with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. So, item 4. Oh, yeah, sorry. Members, there is no dissent, therefore the minutes are agreed. Is that right?
That's right, Chair. We've
Yeah,
agreed.
that's right. Yeah, okay, just checking. Item 4, Annual Audit Committee Report. Please can I ask Dan Kelly to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report is the annual Audit Committee report, which comes to committee every year. And what happens is, this is the draft report. It outlines to members the work that the committee has carried out in the previous financial year. And following this meeting, I will add the items that are on the agenda today. And then this will go to the full council meeting either in June or July, where it will be signed off. As members will see, obviously it's been quite a different year this year. Obviously we've met virtually, and as last year we've continued with having virtual pre-meetings as well. At this point, obviously, if members have any questions or comments to raise, there are officers here this evening who may be able to help and answer that, Chair. So from that point of view, happy to take questions from members.
Thank you. Any questions, members? If there are any questions, can you raise your blue virtual hand and Dan will notify me of any member that will wish to ask a question.
Councillor Coles, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, on page 26-27, it covers the terms of reference of the Audit Committee. And I was wondering whether we ought to review them or reconsider them.
Okay. Is there anybody who has a view to that?
Yeah, I think Pete is going to answer this one, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Coles. I think every year we ought to review the terms of reference just to make sure they're valid and updated. Obviously, this committee is a rather unusual committee because it has powers which ask Cabinet to do things because it's the ultimate control committee of the Council. At the moment, the terms of reference hold reasonably well in terms of what's required because of the investigatory manner of the reports that come here and the fact that you're looking at what has happened and have we actually done it properly. I think it is a broad term of reference. However, we have to make sure that the regulatory framework is adhered to. And I think in reality, it covers just about everything. I think though, where we might bring it up to a degree even further is in the first committee following the elections, because at that stage we have a rather longer session in terms of what the requirements are of committee. And I think we will go through the terms of reference this time just to make sure that everyone has a full understanding of what each one means.
Yes. Because
I think that is quite key, because again, you do have some quite specific powers in this committee, which you just need to really understand what they are.
Okay, anybody, any questions? No? Okay, thank you, members. If there are no more questions, therefore, I'd like to move to the recommendations on page 13. These are to approve the draft annual audit committee report for submission to council as shown in Appendix 1. Members, if you are not in agreement, please raise your virtual hand now.
I have no hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Members, thank you. The recommendations are therefore agreed. Item 5, Internal Audit Plan 2021-22. Please can I ask the Chief Internal Auditor to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The attached report provides Audit Committee members with the proposed internal audit activities for 2021-2022. It sets out the works proposed to enable internal audit to provide a level of assurance to both the committee and the council that there are sufficient and effective controls and governance arrangements in place across the whole organisation. The work is targeted at those high-risk areas which may have a material impact on the City Council, whether that be financial, reputational or operational. We reported to members in January how we actually score and how we rate risk. Our approach and works are set out in the 4 separate appendices in the report. Internal Audit Charter on pages 35 to 50, which is Appendix A, This sets out the approach taken by us to deliver our programme of works. It remains similar to previous years, but it's been amended to reflect greater collaboration and working with others. While we will collaborate and work with others, we still need to remain objective and independent of those. As a service, there are a number of professional standards which we need to comply with, and the document reflects this. We were externally assessed against these standards in 2018, and we were deemed that we were fully compliant. This assessment remains in place for 5 years. With increased links with the County Council through shared services, in order to provide a better assurance to both councils, we've developed a joint working protocol with their head of internal audit. This document will enable us to share information between the two audit teams where there is a common objective. This will enable us to provide a greater level of coverage of the key risks to both councils, and it will avoid the risk of duplication. There's nothing worse than us going into audit an area where the County Council have already done that works, or vice versa. Similarly, developments will look into sharing a best practice, sharing a training, sharing of knowledge. Potentially, we could look at sharing of resources such as secondments, etc. But that will happen maybe further down the line. It has to be reiterated that each council will still have its own audit plan, and the County Council will take theirs to their audit committee tomorrow. The Appendix B is a code of ethics. This sets out our principal behaviours expected to be followed by auditors, and is provided for information in line with our reporting arrangements. It sits along the council's own code of conduct. Annually reviewed, it remains the same as last year. Appendix C, which is our strategy on pages 53 to 60, this sets out the background to developing our audit plans, how and who we have consulted with, and the areas considered for review. We cannot be expected to cover every aspect of the council in any year, but the strategy provides an explanation how we've established our plans. While we still remain in the pandemic, additional factors have been included in our focus this year. As already commented on, extra assurance will be looked at from the county in the shared areas. Resources are key to delivering our strategy. As we reported at our last meeting, we have a vacant post within audit since the end of last year, and another officer seconded within the coordination hub. Agency cover has been explored through the corporate framework contract and has been stepped up due to limited success to date. The areas of activity which is shown on table 56 set out the areas which we're planning to cover, with some brief commentary in section 6 of that appendix. Finally, Appendix D, which is the proposed audit plan on pages 61 to 70. This brings together the strategy and the risk areas to show the scores. Members must be reminded this is a fluid document in that the risks are there, as they stand in the report, may not be the risks of tomorrow. As we undertake a number of the audits, the rest of the plan is rescored. Those audits below the line at present may move up. New risks may emerge. Effective management of that approach will allow us to make sure that audit is always focusing on the latest key risks and providing you with assurance in those areas. So briefly looking at that Appendix D, page 61 sets out the areas which require our attention each year. Time is top slice from the time available to deliver these. These include areas such as working on committees, working groups, follow-ups for previous audits, and providing advice across the organisation. Page 62 sets out the grant certification works. A number of departments obtain grants from various departments, and they have to be priority assurance on, make sure it has been spent in line with those expectations, and we provide that role. Pages 63 to 66 set out the current highest risks which we see across the council. The highest factors at the present moment in time remain the financial resilience of the council as we move forward, as well as COVID works. Other areas which we've been planning to look at of various contracts, such as those with Skanska. Focus on projects and governance rules were looked at in relation to new ventures, such as the town deal or the plans for the regional pool. Similarly, the areas within ICT will be looked at, such as disaster recovery, information governance, cyber security, etc. Finally, as I mentioned on pages 67 to 68, there are areas which fall below the line, areas which we still see as risk and need to be delivered, but based on resources, can't be covered at present. As I've already reiterated, these will be rescored and could go above the line again. Others, as I said, could come in train as well. So the plan is there for members, for your information, for your challenge. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Have we any questions? Let's take it one by one. Number one, Appendix A. Have we any questions with regards to that?
Councillor Jones.
I'm not sure if this is the right place. Really, Steve, it was just a case of, since the last audit, it was a case of what has changed for you, or, you know, how have you had to adapt to things? If that's not I'm struggling a little bit with the audio, so please forgive me. I'm not on my usual audio, so if I'm in the wrong place, do forgive me.
In terms of how we've changed, like everybody else, we are working predominantly from home. A lot of our audit activities now link in with COVID areas. So where grants have been paid, in the next report, which National Fraud Report, there's issues in there in relation to the business grant. We've been assisting various sections across the council as they've changed approaches to be able to deliver their services differently. So we've engaged with them, with the rest of the organisation on those fronts. We're still able to work as an internal audit team, you know, working from home or in the office.
Mm-hmm.
We can still get hold of individuals. We can still get hold of records, albeit it may not be as quickly as we like, but we can still, you know, provide a service and continue to do that. So whilst the pandemic has caused a lot of problems for a lot of people, by and large, we've been able to remain effective.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Are we okay with Appendix A then?
Councillor Coles.
Right, Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, thank you very much. I think this applies to Appendix A as well. And it's really, you mentioned about working across the two councils, and I'd just like a bit more clarity on how you make sure that each work done for either Peterborough City Council or for the County Council is separate, and so that we're not sort of covering each other's costs, if you like.
Yeah, what we've actually done, we've agreed a protocol with their council as well. What it is, we've obviously go through our risk assessment and come up with areas of audits which we need to look at, and also in conversation with their sort of senior managers. Similarly, their audit team will as well. And there's going to be areas of duplication. So what we've been discussing with their head of audit, for example, direct payments is an area which invariably gets looked at on a number of occasions by councils. We don't want to go in and do the same piece of work if they do it before us. What we're going to be doing, I'm going to be holding regular meetings at least every 2 months with their head of audit, so we can coordinate works better, plan it. So if, you know, using that direct payments as an example, if they've got it in their plans for the year, we will not do that audit. We will expect them to do that audit, provide us with details of what they've looked at. We don't want to know the data they've looked at, because obviously that would be confidential, etc. It's sharing the results in terms of, we've looked at process for the direct payments, we're giving that full assurance, or not, as case may be. We may ask them if there are issues to extend that to a cover. What we would looking to do is, so there's more areas within people and communities are covered, so we can, as I said, give you more assurance that that department, which is the biggest spender along with you know, across the council, there's more areas we can cover and provide you with more assurance it's been used effectively, and the resources are okay, and the service is as expected.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, and then clearly Cambridgeshire County Council will be doing the same with their audit team to make sure that equally that they're not doing work for us for free, if you like.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, as I said, they have their own audit plan. We have our plan. As I said, it's almost like you have those two circles, which slightly linked in. There's a bit in the middle which both of us want, and that's a bit which we're still negotiating on. So one of us does it, and it doesn't get missed.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
I'm quite in agreement about Cambridgeshire doing extra work for us at no cost. I think it's an excellent idea. Anyway, we move on and to number 3, to consider and approve the internal audit strategy and plans. Anybody got anything to say with regards to this?
Can't see any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, so we'll go and say, members, if you are not in agreement, please can you raise your virtual hand now? That's it, Dan, isn't it?
See any hands raised, Chair?
Right, members, thank you for the recommendations. Sarah, agreed. If you've heard voices in the background, my daughter has just arrived from work and she's not a happy bunny. So I've tried to close things, but we will see what happens. So I'm sorry about that. Right, here we go. Who would be a father? No. Here we go to item 6, and it's fraud, isn't it? Let's just go down. Investigating allegations of fraud. Please can I ask the Chief Internal Auditor to introduce their report? Introduce the report.
Thank you once again, Chair. The attached report provides Audit Committee members with an update on how internal audit investigations work in relation to looking to provide efficient delivery of fraud works and investigations. With scarce resources across the Council, all services should be vigilant to fraud. It's not just reliant on audit and investigations. One of the specific areas which the investigations team looks at is relating to prosecutions in relation to council tax, business rates, blue badges, car permits, where they've been abused or we've had overpayments, etc. Those reports were provided in our July committee. Those policies remain the same. While the policies in the past, there's been the onus on getting individuals in for formal interview under caution, leading then potentially to prosecution. In light of still remaining in the COVID pandemic and series of lockdowns, etc., that approach is inappropriate because obviously individuals can refuse to come in to the council, and also courts remain closed. So the policies actually reflects this, and once an overpayment has been identified, there will still be checks undertaken to confirm this, and in line with other councils within the region, there is remit within the legislation to formally offer them, remind them that there's an overpayment made which they are duty bound to repay, but there will be a civil penalty added as well, which is a £70 effective surcharge. In the past, we would have done the investigation, done all the prosecutions. It could lead to a sanction, which is 50% of that overpayment. So if the overpayment was £200, they'd be levied with £100 as a sanction. Invariably, the time spent doing the investigations, interviews under caution, etc., it is more feasible and practical in the current situation to impose that civil penalty of £70, and that is the approach which is being followed at present. So that is brought to members for your attention.
Good.
The separate item on the agenda is the National Fraud Initiative. This is a large-scale exercise which is undertaken every 2 years. Following submission of raw data in October, we've recently had our initial matches back. and those that's set out in the reports for the various categories. I do need to note that there is one error in the figures, which is on 4.3.9. The total should be 3,329, not 71. The number 71 is actually the data report from the match. So yeah, that was came across downloaded in error. This year also we have the business grants. There's been a whole host of business grants which have been paid out during the year. We're up to the third phase now. The data you have included there are relating to the first two grants. All the data which was carefully vetted before we made payments have been submitted to as part of the National Fraud Initiative, and comparisons are then being made with Companies House records, bank data records, as well for validity that the bank accounts are still open, etc., and not dormant. So we will continue with work looking at those throughout the year. We are started on the new National Fraud Initiative looking at those other areas, and we are proposing, in line with previous years, to bring regular reports to the senior management team and ultimately into audit committee showing progress against those. My final comment is the National Fraud Initiative provide regular newsletters on what's going on with their matching service and also what's happening across the country and results best practice which is coming out, and included as an appendix is their latest newsletter. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay. Have we got anybody?
Councillor Jones, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, through you, Chair. Steve, just on that sort of the benchmarking, do we ever see any comparative studies just in sort of general terms about who's doing what to who and where, and you know how we stack up against other authorities, just on fraud, and also on perhaps one for Peter on in terms of audit generally?
In terms of benchmarking, for example, for fraud, the national studies are produced each year which show the level of matches, the level of fraud, and they do break that down by the various sectors. So it will show you the amount of frauds which are identified by unitaries or frauds within counties. It doesn't go down uniquely to compare Peterborough with Cambridgeshire or with Fenland, etc. It is by the sector rather than by individual authority.
May I follow that up, please, Chair?
Of course, yes.
So if it's by unitary authorities, do you sort of kick back and relax when you see how we compare with what Peterborough compares with unitaries generally on that sort of apples with apples, or is there any other further work that you need to do to see how we're doing as a unitary authority?
I might have misled you there, Chair. It doesn't actually show Peterborough was ranked 15 out of 36 authorities. All it will actually do is collectively for unitaries, these are the areas which were the highest risk and where they were identified. It gives me assurance if it says there were a lot in, say, car permits, and we have a number identified and we work on those. But if they're coming up with different areas which we have no matches in, it does give me, you could say, does that give me cause for concern? Actually, it gives me a bit of comfort that our data in the first place was probably a lot more robust and had been challenged and is legitimate.
That's what I was asking. No, we've gone beyond the authorities. It was just in certain areas that pertain to unitary authorities that you could look and go, actually, we're doing fairly well by and large, or whether, well, you know, well, nobody's got anything and we've got loads. So that was the question. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have Pete just going to come in, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Back, Pete.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Chair. In terms of the other, looking at ways we compare to others, I mean, if those of us who have been around a while, all the old Audit Commission family trees are always very useful in showing how we worked, and of course they went 10, 12, 14 years ago now. There used to be a good report that came out every September, which was almost a blacklist in terms of saying all those councils that have not delivered on time in terms of audits. However, given this year that over 60% of councils didn't deliver on time, I'm not even sure if the report's been done, but it used to be a significant benchmark because up to a year or so ago, hardly any councils were ever late with their audits. You know, you were talking on one or two hands out of the 424 councils. At the moment, I talked to our external auditors this morning. You know, there's still 150 councils, and we're still clarifying some things on the Empower loan. There's still 150 councils, which is a third of all councils that haven't closed yet for 1920. So, which is, you know, a significant number. In terms of other benchmarking, the only avenues open to us now are obviously we put stuff in the MTFS in terms of local government futures, look at data that we put in from the revenue outturn and revenue estimate forms. And so we obviously are relatively low cost in terms of that. But in terms of looking wider and putting a quality perspective on that, it's quite difficult because of it's just not done to the same degree. You have to, you know, bring someone in externally who goes across a number of councils, and really there's only really Grant Thornton now and Ernst & Young in the sector that is looking across everyone or enough across everyone to actually come up with views. So it's an interesting conundrum now that you actually have to go out and ask, and apart from sort of the more mundane stuff that local government futures and Pixel and other people do, it's quite difficult to actually say. But, you know, from that, we seem to be low cost. And to be honest, if the government hadn't trusted what we've done in terms of the quality of our papers and stuff, we wouldn't have got the capitalisation directions last year and this year.
No.
So I think I'd do it from the negative rather than the positive. But you're right, it's quite disappointing that there aren't the measures that there were there in the past.
Thank you, Pete, through you, Chair. It is, you know, I think I keep going on about this, about context. Is the danger is I don't think we are living in a fool's paradise, but it would be nice to actually, you know, evidence that. Thanks.
We have Councillor Coles next, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. This might be one for Peter. I was just reviewing 423 and 424 of the corporate policies, and the idea that while we can prosecute, it's been impossible to do so, and then there's an opportunity to levy a civil penalty on lesser offences. I'm just wondering, have we done a cost-benefit analysis to see whether actually not going all the way to prosecution but levying a 50% charge is actually economically better for the council?
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Through you, Chair. I'll let Steve answer that, but the analysis we've done, it's more cost effective to do the levy because you don't know how much work you're going to have to do for a prosecution. It could be a week or two. So, but Steve, have you got a view on that as well? I think I'm a massive view we came up with last year when we did it, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, we will still be doing, you know, appropriate checks to make sure that rather than going straight down and levying that that penalty. So yeah, so we will go all as far as necessary. We wouldn't obviously just be doing the interview into caution. So you've got the time to do that. The notes are right to get the formal reports, then everything going into legal, and then setting up the various court cases. So that is where, you know, the time and the expense will then obviously really start to accrue. So levying that £70 penalty will be quicker, free up time, and will be beneficial in the long run.
Yes, thank you. It's almost like saying we're looking for efficiency in terms of recouping the losses, and probably this is a quicker, simpler and less expensive way to do it. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Joseph next, Chair.
Right. Councillor Joseph.
Okay, sorry about that. Couple of things. One, in terms of this levying an additional, you know, up to 50% penalty, how successful do you think it's going to be if they didn't pay in the first place? They're going to pay the additional money. And secondly, how much does fraud cost the council on average per year, both in lost revenue and in costs to investigate and hopefully recuperate?
In terms of how much it actually costs to investigate, obviously I have an investigations team, so those costs are out there in terms of delivery of those, and they don't obviously just do these types of investigations. There are other areas within their remit, such as covering works for human resources for staff cases. So we don't actually break down, the costs for those. In terms of individuals paying, what actually happens is the amount of the overpayment is then placed on their account. So it is automatically in their account, as would be that £70 penalty. That is then linked in with revenues and benefits who agree on a payment process for the individual to repay. So it is put onto their account. I do accept there could be issues about them not paying. I do accept that some of those payment plans may be a bit more protracted, and there are issues in relation to recovery as well.
Thanks, Chair. Just got Pete is also indicated.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Joseph. I suppose my answer to that would be we spend quite a bit on anti-fraud, but you've got a balance between what's best practice and what's onerous, and fraud processes need to be part of your day-to-day running. We are a £450 million turnover business. We give out £45 million of housing benefit. We do, in the last year, we've given out almost £60 million worth of B's grants. We need to have processes in place that allow us to do the job properly, efficiently and quickly, but at the same time, don't open ourselves or the council up to possible fraud. And so it's always a balance we run. As an example, and it's a small one, this one, but we're very good at paying backs now here. We're well over 99%, I think, for backs. What people don't realise is that mailbags still get incepted, and people remove the checks and cash them. So it's moving, and it's a process of trying to move things to the most effective ways of working, and that always tends to help us with fraud. I think we'll probably have a slightly wider, this in a wider context when we go on to the Reaper paper next, but it's now, with the advent of so many people doing things electronically, it's much easier to actually look at people now than maybe it was even 2 years ago. And so you can come to views, but the key is to make sure you get your court processes in place and continue to review them on a yearly basis to make sure you're doing things effectively. They are always onerous for people to begin with, but once they become part of what you do day to day, you have a lot more reliance on everything you do.
If I can just come back, Chair.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So thank you both. As someone who's dealt with debt collection in the business that I work for, I understand obviously how difficult it can be, and fully appreciate that we absolutely must have processes in place, because it's not our money that we're playing with. So if you had to, do you feel that we are doing well? There's always room for improvement, but do you think that overall we are doing very well in terms of both the processes and collection, or do you think that we're not even doing as well as we could be, but also accepting that there is room for improvement?
Shall I start, Steve, and you come in? Thank you. I think we're doing okay. It's always difficult to look at fraud stats, because you don't know some of them until you actually catch them, and there's always new frauds going on. I think what's been an advantage over the last 2 years is the NFI initiatives, where we're now checking data sets between local government, central government and other sources. And, last year, and Steve will correct me on the figure, but we recouped over £60,000 through looking at data matching and other things. So that's really, really important. However, you know, we almost always must be vigilant. You know, one of the things that's going to be a massive impact on us over the next year is the breathing space scheme, where quite rightly the government is saying a lot of people are in trouble. Maybe they've got through the first year of COVID, but the second year, as we move out of it, you know, we need to give people more time to pay bills. Now, obviously, that puts people on payment plans and makes things more difficult for us to trace. That's we need to put processes in place to make sure we're checking that properly. Otherwise, again, we'll see a deterioration. So things continue to change, and it's about keeping abreast of it for me.
Just to add to what Peter's just said, single person discount is probably the biggest success in relation to the National Fraud Initiative. Pete mentioned 60,000. It was actually closer to 100,000 when we came to the end of the exercise, where single person discounts had been stopped from individuals not declaring their changing circumstances. So, you know, at £200, £250 a time, that was additional revenue coming back into the council. So using the current exercise, it's identified just over 3,000 cases where there are potential, as I say, potential claims which are wrong. On the basis, we normally get to say about 5 or 6% actual cases which are fraudulent. That will be significant monies which the council will recoup. You know, you stop that single person discount, you're going to get a lot more money back in.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chair.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair. We have no more hands raised, Chair.
right, thank you. Let me just get onto that. I think that was item 5. We're through with item 5, are we? We've gone through effectively 1, 2, and 3, haven't we?
Yeah, so this was item 6.
Yeah.
Investigation.
I can't remember whether we had any approval for item 5, but I'm assuming we did. Item 6. Members, if you are not in agreement, please can you raise your virtual hand now?
No hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members, thank you for the recommendations are therefore agreed. RIPA now. Item 7, use of RIPA. Please can I ask the Data Protection Officer to introduce the reports?
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of you obviously covers the Council's use of the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act. As a council, we investigate certain criminal offences such as fly tipping, counterfeit goods, rogue traders, blue badge fraud. And as part of those investigations, we can undertake covert surveillance. And RIPA is the governing framework for that. The report covers the kind of covert activities we may wish to undertake in there. I would say, and it's the last line of the report, that we haven't used the powers since late 2017. And largely that's because of something that I think Pete and Steve have touched on, which is that there are other ways to investigate through the use of data and online that are far more efficient for the kinds of matters we're investigating than sitting in a car and carrying out covert surveillance or test purchasing. So there are other means to achieve successful outcomes. As it says in there, there are 2 parts to that RIPA gives local authorities where we need to meet a crime threshold. So that reduces the number of cases that we would use it in, and also it has to be approved by a magistrate. So there are some good controls and strict controls around the use of RIPA by a local authority. We were inspected this year in a virtual sense by the Surveillance Commissioner. And I think part of that is what I've touched on, that we don't use the powers very often. So what they're looking at is more the policy and the training that we give. and they did highlight that we had a good selection of training materials this year. We will be doing more training in the coming year, particularly around social media and raising awareness of RIPA in the authority. We are going to be bringing back a policy to the next meeting of this committee, which will cover the updates that they've asked us if we will do, recommended. And we did see this last inspection as quite often very positive, very helpful and very constructive, and a good chance to test our thinking, especially around social media, especially around how we audit the council's use of social media in investigations, because we have seen more and more people using social media to just simply to communicate with service users and residents. So, as I say, it was a positive experience. I mentioned there's been no use of the powers in the last 12 months. In fact, the last one was in late 2017, running into 2018. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Dan, have we got anything?
Councillor Coles first.
Thank you, Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Ben, thank you very much for your report. I suppose there's a couple of areas a bit surprising, really. The one great fear that we often see CHIS is used in is in the sale of inappropriate articles to underage young people, and I see there's been none of that taking place. I'm not entirely sure that social media monitoring is going to be able to help us with that. I just wonder whether we should be doing that rather than trying for more remote ways of finding out if someone's selling to underage children.
Myself, I mean, the social media area for us, Councillor Cole, is around some of the work we might do in investigating road traders. The test purchasing, I'd be speaking on behalf of Trading Standards and Peter Gell, but I imagine that social media might help them identify a location that would be really investigating and doing test purchasing, but I don't think they'd use test purchasing perhaps in that way. I think in terms of those test purchases around tobacco, alcohol and usually fireworks, I think Peter would have to comment on what the service plan is going forward to maintain those. And I mean, we normally do see in the past, if you went back through past audit committees, there were a number of test purchases being done, not often using CHIS, more around the covert surveillance, because we weren't asking anybody to form a relationship, particularly with the shopkeeper. But I think that would be a question perhaps for Peter Gell as the AD of Regulatory Services to respond to you on.
Thank you very much. The only other issue I have is, we have an epidemic of fly tipping, and I'm just wondering how we're getting on in terms of the CCTV activity, because I think a lot of people would wonder whether we're being very successful.
I think the fly tipping, Councillor, is a very interesting question, because we've tried, again, if you look past audit committee reports, we've done covert surveillance with covert cameras and not been very successful. I would have to refer to Claire George, but I believe the actual overt use of covert cameras has proved more successful. And that's cameras people can't particularly see, but there is a sign up saying we're filming in this area. But I would have to again refer to her on that. But my understanding from what the conversations we've had, because we have talked about whether it would cross into RIPA or not, have shown it's been quite productive so far, and they've gained some evidence that they're following up on. But ironically, that's a covert camera in an overt way rather than falling under RIPA.
Yes, thank you. I thought it was quite a confusing situation we're in, where you use covert equipment overtly. It sort of doesn't quite make sense, does it? But it seems to work.
It does seem to work in this case, yes.
Good. Have we any more hands?
Yeah, Councillor Joseph, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for that. One of my questions was going to be around fly tipping, so I think you've answered that. Although we did recommend having more cameras when we did the task and finish group, so I'm a little surprised that we're not using them more often. The other question is obviously another epidemic that we have in Peterborough in certain areas is drug dealing. So would we not be able to use those RIPA powers to perhaps look at areas where we've had reports of drug dealing on a regular basis and see whether we can't use those to help deal with the issue, which you know is in some areas epidemic, and you know how county lines is being used as well.
Thank you, Councillor. I think in terms of your first point about the fly tipping cameras, my understanding is that there were more cameras bought and they're being used. Again, George will be able to tell you the numbers and how effective they've been. In terms of your second point about using CCTV or cameras for drug dealing, obviously the council doesn't investigate drug dealing. That's in the remit of the police. The police can use our CCTV cameras to assist with that if they follow the correct application, and I believe they do use our CCTV cameras to help their investigations. In terms of our own covert cameras and using it for that, it wouldn't be an offence we as a council can investigate. The police would use their own cameras and their own covert methods without using us. I'm sure if they felt we could support them in any way, they would ask.
No more hands, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Dan. If members are not in agreement, please can you raise your virtual hand now? No, right, members, thank you. The recommendations are therefore agreed. Item 8, debt write-offs over £10,000. Please can I ask members, note there have been no approved write-offs since the last meeting. Are we happy with that? Any questions?
No hands raised, Chair.
No. Okay, thanks a lot. Work programme and item 9, work programme. Please can I ask the Senior Democratic Services Officer to introduce the report. Dan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, this is just a look at the next municipal year's work programme. It's quite a structured work programme that we have. But obviously things can change during the course of the year, but obviously we keep members updated at each meeting. And it's just an opportunity for members to raise any items that they may wish to see in the forthcoming year.
Lovely.
So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Yeah, if you're not in agreement about the notes of the work programme, please raise your virtual hand now. Members, thank you. The recommendations are therefore agreed. Members, this now brings the meeting to a close. I would like to thank members and officers in attendance for their contribution over their year or part of the year. I think it's been a very workman and work lady like year. So